The bank teller's face went cold the moment she looked at her screen. I'd been coming to this branch since they built it in '97, right across from the old laundromat. Same smile, same hello, same $100 withdrawal for groceries in Sunday offering. But that morning something was different. "Just a moment, Miss Bannister," she said, her voice catching like fabric on a nail. "Let me check something." I watched her walk to the back, my hands folded over my purse. When Elise, the branch manager, came out instead, I knew. You don't work 36 years in a school cafeteria without learning to read a room. She had that look people get when they're about to deliver bad news with a sugar coat. "Miss Bannister, would you mind stepping into my office?" That little glass cubicle with the dying fern in the corner. The chair that always squeaked. She laid a printed statement in front of me and pointed to the number at the bottom. "Your available balance is $3,812. The words hung in the air like smoke. I blinked, sure I'd heard wrong. "That can't be right." She nodded, gentle as a nurse with a terminal patient. "That's what I thought too, so I double-checked. But it appears there were several large transfers over the past few months. All to the same account. JR Holdings LLC. I stared at the paper. 5,000 here. 12,000 there. 18,700. Each one labeled the same way. Each one bleeding me dry. "I don't know what that is," I said, my voice small in my own ears. "I don't have a business." She offered me that soft smile they teach in customer service training. Told me to speak to a financial advisor. Told me the bank would cooperate if I needed to report fraud. I nodded, thanked her, and walked out like a woman floating in her own skin. When I got home, I didn't even take off my shoes. Just walked straight to the kitchen table and sat down. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind that hums in your ears and makes you feel smaller than the furniture around you. I spread the statement on the table and stared at it. My hands trembled. My stomach twisted itself into knots. Every dollar in that account came from sweat and sacrifice. 36 years of getting up at 5 in the morning, cooking biscuits, mopping floors. I missed birthdays. Skipped doctor's appointments. Worked while other folks were tired. If you're listening to this and you've ever had someone take what wasn't theirs to take, right, I understand in the comments. Because I need to know I'm not alone in this. I thought of my son, Jalen Rivers. My only child. He'd always been sharp, always dressed nice, always had a slick answer for everything. Lately he'd been talking a lot about investments in real estate. Driving a new car. Wearing shoes that cost more than my light bill. I figured maybe he'd finally hit his stride. I picked up the phone and dialed his number. He answered on the second ring. "Hey Mama. Everything all right?" "I went to the bank today," I said, keeping my voice calm as I could manage. "My account is nearly empty." There was a pause. "Too long." Then he laughed like it was nothing. "Oh that? Yeah, it's just some business stuff. I moved some of your funds into a better account. It's all safe." "What business stuff?" I asked. "You didn't tell me anything about that." "We talked about this a few months ago, Mama. You told me to handle things for you. Remember? I set up a holding account." "No, Jalen. I never said that. I never gave you permission. You probably just forgot," he said, and his voice had an edge now. "I had you sign the papers. It's handled." I couldn't speak for a second. My breath caught in my chest like a bird trapped in a cage. "I want to see the papers," I said. "I'll show you, Mama. Don't worry. Still your money. It's just working for you now." He hung up after that. I sat at the table for a long time. The sun moved across the window and the kitchen grew dim, but I didn't move. I looked at his picture on the fridge. 5 years old, missing front teeth, grinning from ear to ear. I remembered scraping together enough to buy him that graduation cap. Remembered frying chicken at 2 different houses just to afford his school shoes. I picked up the phone again and called Tarek. Tar Ellison, my nephew. My sister Gloria's boy. 29 years old, works with computers, always respectful. Still brings me lemon cake on my birthday and calls me Aunt D. He's got one of those quiet, serious brains. Doesn't talk a lot, but when he does, it's worth listening to. "Hey, Aunt D. Tar," I said. "I think I need your help. Something's not right with my money." He came the next morning. Brought his laptop, gave me a hug, didn't waste time with small talk. I told him everything while he logged into my email and bank account. After a while, he stopped clicking. "Did you sign this?" he asked. I leaned over. It was a scanned power of attorney form. My name, my signature, only the date was wrong. The layout wasn't familiar. I shook my head slowly. "No, that's not mine." It was submitted 2 months ago, he said. And Jalen created a business account. JR Holdings. He listed you as a silent investor. A silent what? Basically, it gave him permission to move your money without telling you. I stared at the screen at the neat little lie that cost me everything. I never told him to do that, I said. Not ever. Tar closed the laptop gently. We need to do something, Aunt Dee. I looked down at my hands, still trembling. He's my son. I know, he said. But that doesn't make it right. Would you let this happen to your own mama? Let me know in the comments. Because I need to understand how a child can do this to the woman who gave him life. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed and watched the streetlights flicker through the blinds. I thought about every meal I skipped. Every time I bit my tongue. I thought about what kind of mother raises a son who could do this. I didn't cry. Not yet. I was past crying. In the morning, I would make a call I never thought I'd have to make. But that night, I just whispered one thing to myself. Not again. Tarek came by again the next morning, earlier than I expected. I hadn't even put my hair up yet. He brought his laptop, a folder of printed screenshots, and 2 blueberry muffins in a brown paper bag. Said he picked them up from that bakery near 47th because he knew I liked them soft in the middle. That boy always was thoughtful. He sat at my kitchen table and walked me through what he'd found. Showed me the email I supposedly sent Jalen with a scanned power of attorney attached. My name was on it, my signature too, but the shape of the D was off and the R in Bannister didn't curl the way I always wrote it. I knew right away it wasn't mine, I said, shaking my head. That's not my signature. That's not even how I write. Tar nodded. I figured. And look here. He used this to register you as a silent investor in his company, JR Holdings. He linked it to your pension account. The bank assumed everything was authorized. I felt sick, pulled my cardigan tighter around my shoulders and leaned back in the chair. I told him to help me with groceries, I said. Not wipe out my whole future. I know, he said quietly. But the paper trail says otherwise. And that's what matters in court. I looked at him confused. Court? We need to get a lawyer, Aunt Dee, he said gently. This is serious. He stole over $100,000. This isn't just a misunderstanding. It's a crime. I didn't say anything for a while. My throat was dry. The idea of taking my son to court made me feel hollow inside. But I also knew I couldn't let this go. I had to at least talk to him again. Had to give him a chance to explain himself or maybe fix it. So I called Jalen and invited him over for dinner that Sunday. Didn't tell him what it was about. Just said I was cooking his favorite. Roast chicken, collard greens, candied yams, sweet tea. I wanted it to feel warm, familiar. I wanted to believe that maybe the boy I raised was still somewhere inside that man. He arrived a little after 6 with Janice in tow. Janice Rivers, his wife of 8 years. Always dressed like she was on her way to a photo shoot. White blouse, gold watch, hair curled perfect at the ends. She smiled when she hugged me, told me the house smelled like home. I forced a smile and welcomed them in. We ate in the dining room. I'd set the table with real napkins and the glass dishes I usually saved for Thanksgiving. Jalen talked about some new development he was bidding on. Janice talked about her interior design blog getting sponsored. They laughed. They complimented the chicken. But I couldn't focus on any of it. I waited until the plates were cleared and we were sipping tea before I said what I came to say. Jalen, I began, keeping my tone gentle. I went to the bank last week. They said someone moved over $100,000 out of my account. All of it went to something called JR Holdings. He blinked, then sat back in his chair. Right. That's the investment account. We talked about that. No, we didn't, I said. I never agreed to that. I never signed anything. Janice reached out and placed her hand over mine. Misty, you mentioned a while ago you were feeling overwhelmed with bills and passwords and all that. You said maybe Jalen could help take over some of the financial stuff. Maybe that's when it got started. I pulled my hand back slowly. I said he could help me with groceries. With errands. Not this. Jalen's voice took on that edge I remembered from when he was a teenager and didn't want to be told what to do. Mama, you signed the papers. I have them. You just don't remember. I remember what I signed, I said, sharper now. And I remember telling you that money was for emergencies. Not some LLC with a name I never heard of. Janice stayed quiet. Her smile was gone. Then Tarek, who had been sitting quietly on the far end of the table, finally spoke up. She didn't sign those papers, Jalen. That signature was forged. You committed fraud. Jalen turned to him like a switch flipped. This has nothing to do with you, Tar. You're not family. She's my aunt, Tar said, calm but firm. That makes it my business. You're just an outsider running his mouth. Stay in your lane. I stood up. That's enough. Both of you. My voice was shaking. My hands too. I looked straight at my son. Jalen, I raised you better than this. I broke my back working to save that money. I went without. I skipped meals so you could eat. I pawned my wedding ring to buy you a graduation suit. And you took everything I saved like it was owed to you. Mama, he said, rolling his eyes. You're acting like I stole it. I'm investing it. You'll see it grow. I started to cry. I didn't want to, but I couldn't help it. The tears came fast and full, my shoulders shaking. Please, baby. Just give it back. We don't need to do all this. You can fix it. We can make it right. He looked at me and something cold passed across his face. You can't even walk up the stairs anymore, he said. What do you need that kind of money for? Janice's eyes widened, but she said nothing. I covered my mouth, stunned. Tar stood, stepping between us. That's your mother, man. What is wrong with you? Shut up, Jalen snapped. You don't know what this family needs. You don't know what I've been carrying. No, I said, trembling. You don't get to say that. I carried you for 9 months and then for 44 years after that. Everything you are, I paid for. He grabbed his coat and walked out. Janice followed, avoiding my eyes. They didn't even finish the tea. After the door closed, I sat back down. Tar stood in the doorway, watching me cry. I didn't want to believe he'd talk to me like that, I whispered. Tar's voice was low. You gave him every chance, Aunt Dee. Now we need to fight back. I didn't respond right away. My hands were shaking too badly to hold the tea glass. We need to take this to court, Tar said again, firmer this time. Before he does worse. I closed my eyes and nodded once, slowly. Find me a lawyer. If you think I deserved better, write mother in the comments. If not, write one. But be honest. Because I need to know if I'm wrong for wanting justice from my own child. I didn't sleep much that night. After Jalen walked out and Janice right behind him like a ghost, I sat in my kitchen with the lights off. Just listening to the hum of the fridge and the creak of the old house settling. I kept hearing his voice in my head. What do you need that kind of money for? The boy I carried in my body, fed from my own hands, now looked at me like I was a burden. Like I'd lived too long. The next morning, Tar made a few calls. Said there was someone I should talk to. Someone who handles cases like this. Her name was Nova Perryman, an elder law attorney in town who left corporate law after her own aunt got scammed by her caregiver. Tar said she didn't take on many cases, but when she did, she fought like hell. Nova came to my house that Thursday afternoon. I'd made sweet tea and wiped down the table 3 times before she even knocked. She walked in wearing slacks and a leather bag slung across her chest. Eyes sharp but warm. She sat down, pulled out a legal pad, and asked me to tell her everything. I walked her through the bank visit, the forged signature, the business name I never knew, my son's reaction, the way he spoke to me. I told her I'd begged him to stop. That I cried in front of him and he looked through me like I was already gone. Nova nodded slowly, taking notes with one hand. Do you have the original power of attorney from before? I opened the drawer near the fridge and pulled it out. I'd filed it away back when I thought I could still trust Jalen to do the right thing. It was dated 3 years ago. We'd revoked it together after a disagreement about some stock advice he gave me that went sideways. Nova compared it to the new one Tar had found. The dates didn't match. The formatting didn't match. And worst of all, my signature looked pasted in. This was submitted after the revocation, Nova said, pointing at the screen. This is identity theft. He used a forged POA to establish authority, then opened a business account in your name without your consent. That's elder financial abuse, wire fraud, and misappropriation of funds. I sat there quiet. I didn't need the legal words to understand what had been done to me. My bones already knew it. My chest already knew it. Nova asked if I wanted to file a formal complaint and begin proceedings. I hesitated. But he's my son. Nova set down her pen and looked at me straight. And you're his mother. You gave him life. He gave you betrayal. That doesn't make you the one who needs to apologize. I looked over at Tar, who hadn't said a word since Nova walked in. His jaw was tight, his eyes steady. He was waiting to see if I would let it happen again. If I would let it slide like too many mothers do, thinking love means letting it go. I don't want him to go to jail, I whispered. You want your life back? Nova asked. I nodded. Then let the court decide how far this needs to go. Your job is to tell the truth. That's all. I closed my eyes for a second. When I opened them, my voice came out quieter than I expected. Do it. We filed the police report the next day. Nova handled everything. I signed the paperwork with a pen that didn't tremble, even though my hands wanted to. She said we had more than enough to subpoena his bank records, tie the forged documents to his IP address, and prove deliberate theft. She said judges don't take kindly to children bleeding their parents dry under the disguise of family. 2 weeks passed in silence. Then one afternoon, there was a knock at the door. I opened it and there he was. Shoulders tense, lips curled in disgust. He had a folded envelope in one hand and fury in his eyes. I could see the edges of the subpoena sticking out. You really called the police on me, he spat. On your own son. I didn't move from the doorway. You left me with $38, Jalen. He stepped inside without being asked. Tar was in the living room and stood up quick, but I motioned for him to stay back. I told you I was handling things, Jalen said. You've embarrassed me in front of my wife. My partners. You stole from me, I interrupted. You forged my signature. You used my name to fund some fake company. It's not fake, he shouted. It's a real business. I'm building something for us. No, I said. You built it for you. You drained my pension. You looked me in the eye while I begged you and you kept going. He sneered. You don't even know how the world works. You think scrubbing cafeteria trays for 30 years makes you an expert on investments. I know enough to know what you did is wrong. Tar stepped forward. You need to leave, man. Jalen turned on him like a viper. You don't speak to me. You're not even real family. She's more family to me than you are, Tar said. You betrayed her. Jalen looked back at me, breathing hard. Do what you got to do, old lady. You're already halfway in the grave anyway. I didn't cry. Not this time. I just stepped back and closed the door in his face. He didn't knock again. That night, I sat in my living room with Tar and Nova. A cup of tea in my hand and my name back in my mouth. I wasn't scared anymore. I wasn't confused. I was angry. I was hurt. But most of all, I was ready. Nova said the next step was court. And this time, I'd be the one walking in with the truth on my side. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that silence doesn't mean weakness. Because too many of us stay quiet when we should speak up. The courthouse smelled like lemon polish and cold paper. The kind of place where people whisper even when there's nothing to hide. I sat in the front row of the courtroom, my palms resting on my lap, my back straight no matter how much it ached. I wore my husband's funeral brooch on my jacket. Not because it matched, but because I needed something strong pinned to me that day. Tar sat on my right, quiet as always but protective in the way I didn't have words to thank him for. Nova Perryman, my attorney, sat on my left, flipping calmly through her files with the focus of a woman who had been preparing for this moment her whole career. We'd submitted everything. Bank records, IP traces, the revoked power of attorney, even the email headers. Nova said we had enough evidence to make the courtroom fall silent. And then Jalen walked in. He wore a charcoal gray suit, neatly pressed with a silver tie I'd never seen before. Janice followed behind him like a shadow. She had on pearls and her hair was perfect, but her face looked tight. She avoided my eyes when she passed, sitting beside him without a word. Jalen looked straight ahead like this was a business meeting. He didn't glance in my direction. Not once. The bailiff called the courtroom to order. The judge walked in. His Honor Lionel Drayton. Black man, mid-60s, kind face but no nonsense in his voice. I'd looked him up. He used to be a public defender, then a family court judge. Tar told me he had a reputation for being firm on financial crimes involving the elderly. I prayed silently he'd see through the suit and hear the truth. Tar took the stand first. I didn't know what pride felt like in a courtroom until I saw my nephew sitting there. Spine tall, voice clear, walking the court through everything he found. He showed the forged POA submission date, pointed out the IP address that traced back to Jalen's home office, and explained how the transfers were disguised as family investments. He was calm, respectful, and never raised his voice. Not even when Jalen's lawyer tried to rattle him. Next came the financial expert Nova brought in. She explained how pension funds are monitored and how the bank accepted the forged paperwork only because of the authority that came with the fraudulent POA. She confirmed I'd been wiped clean over 10 months. $132,000 gone. Most of it in chunks too large to ignore. Nova stood and presented our case like a woman holding a blade she knew exactly how to use. She walked the judge through each document, each date, each lie. She showed a copy of the original power of attorney we had revoked and placed it side by side with the forged one. She held up my signed affidavit and read my statement aloud. Every word rang out in that room like church bells. Then she turned to me. "Mrs. Bannister, would you like to speak?" I stood slowly, heart pounding in my chest like thunder. I took the stand, swore myself in, and sat down across from the judge. He looked at me kindly, like he knew what it cost me to be there. "I worked in a school cafeteria for 36 years," I began, my voice trembling but not weak. "I cleaned grease traps, scraped trays, and cooked meals for children that didn't always say thank you. I never asked for much. I never had much. But I saved every month, every year because I wanted to grow old without having to ask anybody for help." My eyes moved to Jalen. He was still looking straight ahead. No shame. No fear. I gave my son everything I had. I skipped meals so he could eat. I went without coats so he could have new shoes. I didn't raise him with a silver spoon, but I raised him with love. And when I found out that the same child I sacrificed for had taken everything I built, I begged him to stop. I cried in front of him. I said, "Please, baby, just give it back." And he told me I didn't need it. Said I was halfway in the grave. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. I took a shaky breath. I didn't come here to ruin my son's life. I came here because mine was already ruined. And I want it back. I stepped down and walked back to my seat. Tar touched my shoulder. Nova whispered, "You did perfect." Jalen's lawyer spoke next. He tried to paint the picture of a misunderstanding. Said Jalen believed he had his mother's permission. That he intended to pay it all back. That it was family business. But the judge didn't look moved. He didn't interrupt, but he didn't take many notes either. When Jalen finally took the stand, he spoke calmly. Said I had told him to handle things. That I was getting overwhelmed with bills. That he had nothing but good intentions. He never once said the word sorry. When they asked him directly, "Did you obtain her permission in writing?" he stumbled. "Well, she signed the POA. "No," the judge interrupted. "Did she give you permission for these transfers?" Jalen's jaw clenched. It was implied. Nova stood for one final question. "Mr. Rivers, do you believe that draining your elderly mother's entire pension without clear consent was the act of a loving son?" Jalen didn't answer. The judge closed his folder and said he would deliver his ruling in the morning. As we left the courtroom, I felt heavy. Not relieved. Not yet. Just tired. Janice walked out quickly ahead of us. Tar offered to drive me home. I nodded. My legs suddenly sore from the day's wait. That night, I sat in my living room holding the photograph of Jalen at age 6. He had missing front teeth and a Kool-Aid stain on his chin. I kissed that photo, then turned it face down on the table. Whatever came tomorrow, I knew the truth had been spoken. And I was no longer the one who needed to be ashamed. Let me know where you're listening from. I want to know who's still out there hearing women like me. Because we all have stories. And they all deserve to be told. I didn't sleep the night before the sentencing. My mind kept playing everything over. The courtroom. The forged signature. Jalen's face when I begged him. I sat by the window until the sky turned gray, watching the neighborhood cats creep across the sidewalk like shadows. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't angry. I was just tired. Tired in a way that reached down into my bones. Tar picked me up that morning. He didn't say much, just opened the car door and made sure I had my walking cane. He looked like he hadn't slept either. As we drove, I kept thinking about what the judge might say. Whether Jalen would look at me. Whether he would finally feel something. We arrived early. Nova was already there, standing near the front steps of the courthouse with a file in her hand and that focused look in her eyes. She nodded at us. No speeches.